Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from a brewer we've only ever had one or two of their beers, and it's certainly been quite some time, and that is Crux Fermentation Project out of Bend, Oregon. Today is another beer in their Banished series. I believe the last one we did by Crux was also in their Banished series, which really is just their designation that they put the beer away for additional aging. In this case, it's in oak for several months before they come back and bottle it. This is a 2021 release of a bourbon barrel-aged porter called Ribbon of Darkness. It clocks in at 11% ABV. So, label art on this, it's just a very clean design. The camera probably won't pick it up, but it does have some kind of moon, hole, and crescents kind of alternating in a pattern with some clouds on a night sky. It's probably not being picked up at all on the camera, but be that as it may, this is a gold wax-dipped cap, so we've got our trusty pointy end here. As always, we will score directly underneath the edge of the cap to free wax out of the way and give us a nice area to get a grip underneath the cap and get this off. Got it on the first try, not bad. Just give a little quick wipe. Trying to make sure it's relatively clean. That keeps wax from dropping in the beer. Not the end of the world if it does, but I like to keep it out if I can. So, got our trusty porter glass. As always, we will get this poured right in. All right, this one is not super thick, but it's pouring nice and dark. It is a porter, so it's quite active with carbonation. That's very typical. Let's see, this one actually looks like it formed a pretty nice tight head here. So it's not quite as big effervescence as you can often find in a porter. I can tell you this one is essentially pitch black. The only hint of light I'm even remotely being able to pick up is at the very, very bottom of this glass where it's very, very thin, just a tiny amount of beer there. For all intents and purposes, this is a pitch black beer. If you were not holding this up in front of a super bright LED set light, probably wouldn't be able to discern it's not pitch black. That it is. It's very, very dark indeed. Let's give a full sniff. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. There's a good bit of nuance here. So the barrel from the barrel aging itself comes out, but it's not over the top. It's not, one of those that's overriding the other subtlety and nuance of aroma that's popping out of this beer. And indeed, I can smell distinctly bourbon. It does smell distinctly of bourbon. There's some slight kind of sweet notes on this one. There's no real astringency. It doesn't smell boozy. And there's a little bit of a caramel and vanilla kind of aroma coming off of it as well. That feels to me like it's coming directly from the bourbon barrel side of things, because the underlying malt bill I'm getting is definitely a little bit on the roastier end. The bourbon does come out a little more pronounced than the underlying malt bill of this porter, but in general, I can pick them both out and it smells very, very nice. So typically by this point, in many, many porters, we would see, if not the majority, the head already completely gone, unless you're at a bar that puts porters on nitro. Some do. This one actually did a very good job. I've still got a good bit of cling, nice little pad on top. Looks nice. So let's just jump right in and see what this one's about. It smells great. Oh yeah, that's a big beer. That's a very big porter. Wow. I expected it to be. It's 11%, of course, but owing to the relative balance of the aromas and just not the kick you in the teeth like you often get with bourbon barrel aging or any other kind of spirit, once you get into the flavor profile, the bourbon is big and bold right up front and center. It's got a very pronounced bourbon kick. There's a little bit of a booziness to it. It's very spirit-laden, very barrel-laden. There's a nice bit of char, and indeed there's underlying nuance of vanilla, kind of caramelized sugar, but I'm getting a lot of molasses out of this one as well. Very, very nice layering of flavors to this bourbon, and it's quite bold. In terms of the underlying malt bill, the porter itself, it's a little more subdued, just like it is in the aroma, but it's still there. And it's clearly on the roasty side, but it's not maybe quite as roasty as you would expect, especially given the hue. I think that comes down to not the depth of level of roasting on the malts themselves, but just the overall volume. This is an 11% ABV porter here. So yeah, there's a lot more of those malts in there, which are naturally going to draw out the color. I'm not suggesting that there aren't plenty of really nice, heavily roasted malts underneath in this malt bill. I'm just saying that on the forefront, it's not oppressively roasty. I'm not getting massive undercurrents of char or tons of kicks of earthy bitters, at least on the first sip. It's a little more subtle, a little more subdued. I'm getting more kind of nutty nuances out of the malt bill here, and it's very, very nice. The other thing I'm also very pleased to report, and I talk about this basically every time I have a porter, is this does not have any funky off flavors at all. Often with porters, you'll get these weird, it almost tastes like the beer has skunked or gone bad, and has these intense kind of raisin-like that border on like spoiled. There's nothing like that in this porter. This is a classic porter with a bourbon barrel aging. It's just done well with a really nice quality bourbon. I don't know the exact barrel that they use. In fact, let me just take a quick peek on the back of the label here. They might have mentioned, 6 months in... I think that they do, but I'll need to get it with a brighter light. Frankly, I need new glasses, and it's really small font. But I promise, if they mention it, I will mention it when we get to the scores. But my initial impression is very, very nice. This is a very, very well done porter. It's a very, very big porter. The barrel aging is excellent. The balance of that and the balance of the malts is really, really nice. This is extremely well done. A lot of complexity here, a lot of layers here. So we're going to jump back in for a second sip. We're going to pick apart anything I may have missed, and we will talk a bit further about the flavor nuances that pop through in the order, and then we will definitely talk about this finish. But I absolutely love it. This is a very well done porter indeed. The body on this one is not as big as you'd expect. It's really just medium. There it is again, that big in-your-face bourbon. The body is a nice medium. The mouthfeel is a bit more resistant than the body is weighty, and kind of typical porter fashion. You can feel that there's some thickness to it and some resistance, but it's not one of those that feels really viscous. It's not a viscous feeling beer to it. And you can often feel the effervescence on porters. They tend to have kind of bigger carbonation bubbles that come off. This one, not that way at all. You can just feel the resistance of it. The mouthfeel is definitely a lot more substantive than the body, especially considering this 11% ABV. In terms of what pops out on second sip, any nuance I might have missed, really nothing. It's exactly like I got on the first sip, and it's kind of in the exact same stages of how they present themselves to you. It's just re-intensifying because I'm getting to come back and get another sip of it. And I really like the nuances that are coming out, especially on the tail end. By tail end, I really mean 10-15 seconds after the kind of intensity settles down and starts to plateau a little bit. The nuances that pop out of the barrel side, as well as the malt bill, are really, really nice. That kind of molasses pairing with this nuttiness coming out of the malt bill, that's really, really nice together. It's really, really nice together. You still get these burnt caramelized sugars and kind of nuances of, there's almost this honey and or syrup sweetness to it that pairs with vanilla in the middle of it. It's very, very nice. It's very nuanced. There's a lot of ribbons that keep flowing in and out. In terms of the finish, this is longer than average, as you might expect. It is a big 11% bourbon barrel-aged porter. And yeah, on this one, there's no intensity of bitters, really. There's no intensity of earthy, kind of charry roast lingering on the back of the palate. The driving factor on the length of the finish on this one is 100% coming from the bourbon barrel aging itself. And it's quite pronounced. It's big, bold, in your face, up front and center, right out of the gate as soon as you swallow. And yeah, it's big. And there is a decent bit of resistance to it, so it does tend to coat the palate pretty well, and you are left with these lingering leftover bourbon barrel aging flavor characteristics. Quite longer than your average porter. But I did kind of expect it on a beer like this, and no surprise there. Overall, this is an excellent, excellent package. I think that this has a lot of different, particularly nuanced aromas and flavors that you don't always get in a porter, that together, especially with this really excellent bourbon barrel aging, just makes for a real treat of a beer drinking experience. This is not a run-of-the-mill porter. This is very well done. I really, really enjoy it. So I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores, and when we come back, we'll get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Crux Fermentation Project's Ribbon of Darkness 2021 release, a bourbon barrel aged porter that is 11% ABV. Crux Fermentation Project is based in Bend, Oregon. And yeah, this was a really, really nice beer overall. Came very close to getting top marks in all categories. There were just a few where it did not. So we will touch on those as we go down the list. But starting with the aroma on this beer was exactly as I would expect for a really big Imperial barrel-aged porter. And indeed, the bourbon barrel was quite pronounced on this. You could get a little bit of the underlying roastiness, but overwhelmingly it was the barrel that really came off on the nose. And it was quite pronounced. It smelled really, really nice. This one I only docked 1 point here. The aroma gets a 9 out of 10. For the taste on this was excellent. This was one of those porters, I talk about this often, no funky off flavors, no weird overtones. There was a nice roasty malt base that was perfectly executed, paired with a really well selected and right amount of time bourbon barrel aging process that just made for a really nice, big, deep beer drinking experience. The taste gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body in this I was actually pretty surprised. It was really just the low end of average. It was medium, give or take, almost kind of even bordering on the medium light. It really wasn't as robust and weighty as I expected for 11% on an Imperial Porter, but it is what it is. The body gets a 4 out of 10. For the mouthfeel. Mouthfeel, on the other hand, was quite a bit different story. This was pretty substantive and had a really nice bit of resistance. This didn't kind of take the line that many, if dare I say most porters do, where you can really feel a ton of effervescence and carbonation as it's moving around the palate. This one didn't do that. You could really just feel the resistance there, or certainly above average. And this one, the mouthfeel, I did give an 8 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was much longer than your average Imperial Porter, and really the driving factor on this one was the underlying bourbon barrel aging. It really did push the kind of driving force behind the length of the finish, with bourbon barrel lingering on the back. There were elements of the underlying malt bill, but it wasn't super dominant as the driving factor in extending the length of the finish. It really was driven by the barrel, and this one was quite long indeed. The finish gets a 9 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did an absolutely fantastic job. It formed a big, thick, lush, creamy head, stuck around the whole time. The head and retention gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was just about as close to pitch black as you could get. Indeed, without really bright LED lights, you probably would say it's pitch black. That's exactly what I expected. Appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was excellent. Whatever hops they used in an amount that didn't kind of override the classic underlying porter elements, and the porter and its base kind of malt roastiness was really quite nice, but the bourbon barrel was also really quite nice. It was one of those where you can pick them both out independently, and they both have their part to play, and one wasn't really overriding the other. It was just very, very well put together. The balance does get a perfect 10 out of 10. Filling in the intangible, subjectively, I loved this one. I give it a perfect score, 10 out of 10. Finally, is an example of this style. So just a few categories where a few points were lost, but really this was an extremely well done barrel-aged Imperial Porter, and I do think that it earned its perfect 10 out of 10 as an example of this style, which does bring the total score on Crux Fermentation Project's 2021 release of Ribbon of Darkness to 90 out of 100. So well above average. And really, if we take the body where it lost the most points was 6, look, it is what it is. Let's just pretend for the sake of argument it got a perfect score. That would immediately throw this score on this beer to a 96. So yeah, 90 out of 100 is still well above average, But if you're thinking, I'll skip that one, there's so many that get 96, 97, 98. Now, do yourself a favor. This is a very, very well done porter. The balance was impeccable and really excellent barrel selection and requisite amount of time. This was an extremely well balanced beer. I absolutely loved it. I would recommend this to any fan of big, dark beers, be they barrel aged or otherwise. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.